Jamie, are you ready to talk to Theodore in Minnesota?
I am.
All right, you're up here at the top of the show, Theodore. You have cutting-edge proof of God's existence. Tell me about it.
Oh, so to kind of connect for some reason. That might happen one or two times here, but so
yeah, we're hearing you now. Let's jump into it.
Okay, so my thing's about Genesis. It's the first book of the Bible allegedly written by Moses, who was like in personal contact with God. And I was an atheist most of my life, like until I was 21. And my dad, he's a very smart person. He's very intelligent. He's atheist. He's volunteerist. He's a anarchist, capitalist, information security guy. He drilled atheism into my life, and I turned around and I drilled it into other people's ears. And when I was 21, Christian, they challenged my viewpoints, and I discovered William Lane Craig and his cosmological argument. That's what first started me down the path of atheism. But today, in modern times, I've discovered that it's not only just that God exists, but it's the God of Israel. And how I know it's the God of Israel is because the Bible has parts that couldn't have been known at the time that it was authored.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm glad that we're getting to the thing. What do you believe and why? I'm getting that you believe in the God of the Bible. Give me your proof. Okay.
So first off, when you look at the Big Bang epochs, that they perfectly mirror Genesis 1. For example, God said, "Let there be light."
Let me hold on real quickly just to understand you better. When you say that the Big Bang mirrors everything we see in Genesis 1, can you tell me a little bit about your understanding of the Big Bang, or rather your credentialing, or how you're getting there? Like, how do you know, or what have you read, and what do you understand about the Big Bang?
There's the 5 epochs of the Big Bang. And they're basically what it is the theory of everything and the grand unified theory breaking into the 4 fundamental forces as the universe expands and cools. And
can you tell me a little bit about your background here?
I honestly am just a hobbyist with this stuff. I just have an extreme interest in theology, physics. I read online a lot, Wikipedia, YouTube. I check the sources, read science articles.
So I do have a question then for you, Theodore. And it's a simple one. I've asked it several times to other people. In the Big Bang cosmological model, what comes first, light or the Earth?
Sound. What comes first is wave propagation. Baryonic acoustic oscillations is what they're called.
No, light is photons. No, Theodore, light is photons. I only did senior AP physics, but I know what light is made of. Okay, and it's photons, and photons came before any of the heavy elements and long before the Earth. So how do you square that? Because in Genesis, God creates the Earth and then says there's light.
Are you just going to talk over me the whole time or what?
Okay, Theodore, let's play nice. The question here is, if you're going to say that because the Bible reveals things about the creation of the universe that we couldn't have possibly known, or that the writers of the Bible couldn't have possibly known, shouldn't it also be true that everything that they wrote is accurate if we're going to take them as reliable narrators, as genuine, sincere experts here? So Jamie is just asking you, this appears to be... Theodore, I'm not talking over you. I'm just talking, and then you start. That's the kind of the problem. In the Bible, it says pretty clearly that first came the earth, then came light. Can you explain that? Does that line up with your understanding of our cultural, scientific understanding of the Big Bang?
Yes, I can.
Help me. Okay, do it, please.
Etymology and the word earth. And the word earth has a flexible meaning that's related to matter or land. And it says that earth was formless, and matter comes in multiple forms, solid, liquid, gas. And the only ones that don't have a form are liquid and gas. And it was a Bose-Einstein condensate. And that's why it's described that way.
Okay.
There's more. I have more to that, but you keep cutting me off.
Sure.
I was just acknowledging what you
yeah.
were saying, Chief. I'm not trying to cut you off. I just said, okay.
It does still sound like matter before light, which is a little bit contrary to my comprehension of it. But I think that you have a pretty reasonable point here, Theodore, and I really appreciate your willingness to slow down and explain it to us. Please continue.
Okay, so and then another thing is, so what we know is E equals mc squared. Energy, equals matter times the speed of light and everything like that, which is how, like, force carriers and particles, there's wave-particle duality. So all the matter that there ever was comes from these force carriers, such as photons. But before there was even photons, there was wave propagation, baryonic, acoustic, oscillations. Literally, it's the Terrence Howard shit, kind of, as far as keys and sound vibrations, etc. God said, "Let there be light." He did literally indicate that there was wave propagation before there was actually photons. And the reason why he says it that way is because he's talking to a guy in the Bronze Age who does not have the benefit of living in the 21st century with science that we have and the terms that we have. So he had to explain it to him in the way that would make sense to him, that now when we recheck it, it still makes sense to us.
I hear that, yeah. And so your contention here is that using a modern scientific language and comprehension of the world, that we can then go back and read English translations of ancient Semitic poetry and be able to develop a coherent, consistent understanding of the creation of the universe, and that ultimately is proof that God is real?
That's one of my proofs, of one of many, and it's for every single day of Genesis that I can prove to you coincides with a portion of evolution. And it's not the English version, it's the Hebrew, because it was written in Hebrew. So you have to compare modern science to what God was speaking to them in Hebrew.
Right, and I appreciate that. I'm just also wanting to acknowledge the many layers of alienation that exist between you and I having this conversation and those words allegedly being written down when they were. The different ways that you and I, as not astrophysicists, may struggle with comprehending some of the science, and the ways that you and I, not as classical linguists, may struggle with understanding the Hebrew. I'm not dismissing anything you say just because neither of us are super qualified to understand all those things, but I do want to just highlight that some of the squish and the ish that can come from our sort of less than academic understanding of some of these principles.
You want to hear a really big one? Is Genesis 2:23 says, "This is the bone of my bone, and this is the flesh of my flesh." And it's Adam talking, and Adam is made of flesh and bone. And he's describing what his flesh and bones are made of in Genesis 2:23. Now, humans have 24 ribs. When you take one away, you have 23 ribs. Humans get 23 chromosomes from each parent, and only the males have the Y chromosome, so that's why it had to be Adam's rib. And if you take DNA and you spell it out, you get DOXY ribonucleic acid. It literally says XY rib in DNA right now.
So that's completely a post hoc rationalization. It's deoxyribonucleic acid. It's not dioxyrib. It's ribonucleic acid. And
right.
I'm sorry. I'm going to Theodore. Please let me speak. I feel that you are basically fitting your model into what is extremely vague language. There are still other things that are unexplained. So before any of the earth was created, God separated the waters of heaven from the waters of the earth. Water has a very specific meaning, especially in science. It is H2O. So what is the water that came before the earth?
Can I tell you what that is? The reason
Go ahead.
is because hydrogen is what stars are made of, and hydrogen is the main part of water. Water is 2/3 hydrogen, 1/3 oxygen. Hydrogen comes in 3 isotopes.
Yes, but most of the early stars were comprised of helium that was fusing into hydrogen. Oxygen came much later, and it wasn't liquid water. It's like you wouldn't say a star is made of water. It's made of component things. I really have to say, Theodore, I'm not finding any of this even remotely convincing, because it's basically shoving what we know now into extremely vague language that actually doesn't seem to make much sense to me. You're not selling me on this, dude. I have to be honest.
It's pretty Barnum statement-y, Theodore. The notion here is that this language is so elastic. It's so old and poetic, and there is so much that goes into interpreting and understanding it. Not that your interpretation couldn't potentially be valid or couldn't possibly make sense, or that you won't someday stand in front of some God and he'll be like, yes, you were right. But I have to say that from where we're sitting now, your explanation is as valid as about a billion others that would probably make more sense if we start to really drill down on some of the details.
That's just how you feel about it. But also, you didn't let me finish about the water being very fundamental to the entire universe. Your mitochondria runs on a proton rotor. There's no body parts in the entire of nature that go in a 360, and cosmic rays are made of hydrogen. The Earth is 2/3 water. Your body is 2/3 water, and it goes all the way down to the quarks being a 2/3 ratio. The moon brings the fucking water here, controls the tides, and controls menstrual cycles. And, you know, like...
The moon does not control menstrual cycles, Chief. The moon does not have anything to do with menstrual cycles other than that the human body's natural rhythm is around about a month long. That's a coincidence, mate.
Yeah, we're definitely playing with, hey, this number would fit here. Let's see what it looks like if I just stack a whole bunch of these coincidences on top of each other. And I hear you, Theodore. I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your drive to work to understand all of this. And I have to say that the way that you're going about it does seem to be what Jamie was pointing out, that notion of, well, we know this and I believe this. How can I shove those two things together? And it's just not compelling to anybody who wants to look at the information at its face level value and doesn't come in with the assumption that the Bible must also definitely be true.
And there's a... Oh, go on.
Evidently, when you explain God, you're going to be explaining a whole lot of different aspects of the universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I will perhaps have that conversation someday, and I will face the consequences of that conversation. But right now, I'm trying to have a conversation with you and Jamie in front of a live audience where I've given you the opportunity to compel other people to believe what you believe by explaining it. So the job here is not for me to defend myself to God. The job here is for you to call in and try to convince the thousands of people watching today that your God is the one true God. And I'm just trying to help you do that by pointing out some of the things that are less than compelling about your argument. So if you have anything to add on to that, if you feel like you want to make one last attempt to try and help us understand where you're coming from or why we should all agree with you, please take this time to do that now.
Okay, it says that there was plants on land before there was a firmament, which is true because the ozone layer comes from algae. But you keep talking over me, so you're never going to hear what I think.
Well, that was your space. Thank you so much for trying again. We do appreciate your time. And yeah, I think you'll give us a little bit to read up on and maybe noodle over. And I hope that you will think not about the facts of these pieces, because as important as that is, your approach in understanding them, the philosophy of knowledge, of how you go about connecting these pieces of information, whether you let the science speak for itself or whether you are trying to shoehorn in these various interpretations, is something that I'll invite you to explore on your own. But I do appreciate your time today.